Hi everyone, I'm attorney Aiden Durham with 180 Law Co. in Colorado, and welcome back to All Up in Your Business. On this episode of All Up in Your Business, we're going to talk about moving your business from one state to another. I'm going to go over some of the different options for moving a business from one state to another, the pros and cons of each, and how you can decide which option is going to work best for you and your business. But first, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, and check the description for links to additional information and resources. All right, so when it comes to moving your business from one state to another, if you are relocating yourself, moving you and your family, you're probably going to wonder, how do you move your business along with yourself and your house and everything else? There are a handful of different ways that you can go about moving your business. Some of them are easy, not a whole lot involved, but may not end up with the result that you want, versus some other options that might be a little bit more complicated or more complex, but will help in the end give you a better result with your business. So I'm going to start with the easiest way of moving your business. And I say moving your business because this option isn't really moving. What I'm talking about is registering and qualifying as a foreign entity in the new state. So if your business is registered in one state and you move to a different state, you can register it as a foreign entity in that second state. Now, we sometimes need to deal with foreign entity registration and foreign entity qualification if we're doing business in multiple states. If we're transacting business in a different state from where our business is registered, then that second state typically requires that we qualify to do business in that state. And the same thing kind of applies if we're moving or relocating our business or ourselves as well. So you keep the business registered in the first state, and then you just register it as a foreign entity in that second state wherever you're moving to. Now, I say this is the easiest way because it doesn't change anything about your business. Your business itself isn't changing to a different state. It's just qualifying and registering as an entity in the second state. The forms involved are typically, pretty straightforward and not too expensive. In Colorado, it's maybe $50 to qualify and register as a foreign entity. You don't have to get a new EIN. You don't form a new business. You don't have to get a new operating agreement for your LLC. Nothing like that. You're really just registering the one entity in a second state. The drawback to this, though, is that now we're dealing with two states. If both states have some kind of annual filing requirement, which most states do, you have to worry about filing those reports in both states. You'll have double the filing fees. Depending on where you're moving from and moving to, you're basically going to have to do two of everything that you file with the Secretary of State. I think this option makes most sense if you're going to have some continuing presence in the original state. If you're still going to have some business activities go on there, or if you're still going to have a location, a storefront, an office there, if you're still going to have some connection to that first state, then registering as a foreign entity in the new state makes sense. But if you're completely done with that original state and you're moving yourself and everything associated with your business to the second state, then, I don't think foreign registration of your LLC or your corporation makes a whole lot of sense, because now you're still dealing with that original state that you really have no connection to. So I'll tell you, I recently did this. I relocated myself from Colorado to California last year, and I took this approach. My LLC is registered in Colorado, and I registered it as a foreign entity in California. But the reason I did it this way is because I still have a business presence in Colorado. Since I'm not licensed to practice law in California, I don't want to put out there that I'm a California lawyer. I'm still a Colorado lawyer. I want to have a Colorado address. I want to represent myself as a Colorado-based attorney and law firm. So since I still have that business presence in Colorado, I still want to be registered there. But since I'm here in California, I'm technically running the business and transacting business here in California, so I needed to register here as a foreign LLC. But if that's not the case for you, if you're done with the first state, completely moving everything to the second state, then this foreign registration usually isn't really going to make sense. So the second option is to dissolve the first company and form a new one in the new state. As far as ease goes, this is a little bit more difficult than registering as a foreign entity, but it's still a bit easier than the other two options that I'm going to talk about. So the process for this would be to dissolve the LLC or the corporation in the original state, and then you form a new one in the state where you're moving to. Not a whole lot to it, but the drawback of doing this is you're creating a whole new business entity. Everything you did the first time around, you have to do again for the second one. So that means, of course, forming the paperwork to get a new entity set up, applying for a new EIN because it's a new entity, drafting a new operating agreement under the new state of where your business is registered. All of that you have to do over again. If you have a credit history, if you have some kind of history with the business, that basically all goes away because that existing business is no more and you're creating a brand new one. But compared to the foreign registration, at least you're not dealing with two states at the same time. That's really the one small benefit of doing it this way. You're also going to have to deal with any contracts that the original entity may have entered into. If you have service agreements with your clients or agreements with suppliers or any other thing that you might have signed a contract under for the first business, those aren't really going to be effective anymore because that first business doesn't exist anymore. You're creating a whole new, brand new entity that needs to now enter into those contracts. So sometimes, depending on the terms of the contract, we might be able to assign a contract from the first entity to the new one. If that's not an option though, we might have to terminate a contract and sign a new one under the new entity. Again, this depends on the nature and the terms of the contract, but just be aware that if you're dissolving the first company and forming a new one in the second state, that's something you're going to have to take into consideration is how do I handle these contracts that my previous company is bound to, and how do I make it so my new company is a party to those contracts? The third option is my favorite option. I think for the most part, it's the best option, but unfortunately, it's not always available. And this is domestication or conversion of the company. I say domestication or conversion because some states use different terminology. Colorado calls it a conversion, so that's how I refer to it. A lot of states call it a domestication. And basically, really all it is changing your business from being registered in one state to registered in another state. We convert it from, say, a Colorado LLC to a Nevada LLC. And that's exactly what it is. It's converting this one to this one. So the benefit of this is that we're not creating a new business like we are if we dissolve the first business and open a new one. We don't have to go through those steps of getting a new EIN or assigning contracts or dealing with how do we handle these contracts. Because for all intents and purposes, it's really just changing where the business is registered, but everything else stays the same. Now, the problem with this, though, is that not every state permits it. Some states don't permit conversions or domestications. And in most situations, the statutes that are discuss this kind of thing are going to say something like, we're cool with it as long as the other state's cool with it too. Colorado's conversion statute says that a domestic entity can be converted into a foreign entity, or a foreign entity can be converted into a domestic entity as long as the laws of the original jurisdiction permit it. So basically, you need to make sure that both states that you're dealing with will permit this conversion or domestication, depending on what term they use. In addition to making sure both states allow it, it's also a little bit more complicated because typically the statutes are going to require some kind of a plan of conversion. This is a document typically that discusses what's going to happen in this conversion or domestication process, how the ownership of the people involved is going to be affected, if it's going to be affected, how liabilities and debts are going to be handled, all that kind of stuff. For the most part, typically it kind of boils down to everything that was with the first company will be with the second company. But you need to prepare this plan of conversion, which isn't readily available on Secretary of State websites. It's not like a form template that you fill out. Certainly there are examples and templates online of this plan of conversion. And this plan of conversion or plan of domestication doesn't usually need to be registered or filed with the Secretary of State. It's just for your own internal records. But in general, if it's permitted, a conversion or domestication is gonna be the best option because you're not starting a new business, you're just transferring essentially the business from one state to another. You don't have to get a new EIN. You don't have to go through that whole process of really setting up a new business. You do typically want to update or amend your operating agreement though, so it conforms to the state laws of that new state. And then once you've got that plan of conversion all taken care of, then you'll file some form with the state, usually with both states. Either Colorado calls it a statement of conversion, just some document that lets the first state know, hey, we've converted from a domestic entity here to a domestic entity there. And then you'll file something similar in the second one saying, hey, we were this entity, now we're this entity. You can also use that tactic if you want to actually change the entity type as well. If you want to convert your business from an LLC to a corporation or corporation to an LLC or something like that, then it's typically a conversion that we'd be doing along with that move. So the drawback with the conversion domestication thing is, number one, not every state's going to permit it. Number two, there's a little bit more involved because you have to prepare that plan of conversion and you will have additional filing fees in both states. But the benefit is that once the conversion or domestication is done, you don't have to deal with both states. You only deal with that new state where your business is now domesticated. And you don't have to get a new EIN. You don't have to restart your business's credit history or entity history. You don't have to deal with contracts because, again, it's the same entity. It's just registered in a different state. And then finally, the last option is a merger. This is usually going to be the best option if you want those benefits of the conversion domestication thing, but if the state doesn't allow it. So in other words, if you don't want to have to start a whole new business, if you want your business to kind of continue as this new one, then a merger might be the best option. And how that works is that you still form a new company, file documents to set up a new company in the new state, and then you merge the two, the existing one and the new one. And depending on the terms of the merger, usually it's going to be that everything that existed with the first company has been basically assumed by the second company. So the second company can continue using the EIN, can assume any contracts or debts, liabilities, obligations, things like that. And you don't have to go through that whole process of really starting brand new with contracts, a new EIN, or any of those things, even though you are, for all intents and purposes, starting a new company. But through virtue of this merger, it's basically like, well, we're just taking over this previous one. So again, just like with the domestication conversion thing, you need to make sure that both states permit it, because this is a statutory merger. So it may not be permitted in all states, or one state may have specific requirements that the other state doesn't have, and you'll need to make sure you're following the requirements of both states. Similar to a conversion or domestication, you're usually going to have to prepare a plan of merger that discusses how this merger is going to go down and what the result is going to be. And then you'll typically file some kind of form, a statement of merger, something like that. Every state calls it something different. But you'll file a form with the first state letting them know, hey, this company has merged with this other one. And then you'll file a similar form with the new state saying, hey, this company has merged with this new one. So to sum it all up, the 4 options if you are moving or need to move your business from one state to the other. Number 1 is foreign entity registration and qualification. This is going to be the easiest and best option in most cases, particularly if you have a continuing presence or business transactions in the first state. Then foreign qualification is going to make the most sense. Option 2 is dissolving the first entity and forming a new one in the new state. Not a whole lot that goes into it. Typically easy enough, but the drawback is that you're forming a new business and you got to really start all over again. Then we've got the merger option where you still form a new business, but then the two merge and become one. And then lastly, my favorite, the preferred option in most cases, in my opinion, is a conversion or domestication if both states permit it, because that's going to allow you to continue with the same business. Nothing changes except for the state where it's registered. That's all for this episode, folks. Drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. If you are moving your business from one state to the other, it's always a good idea to talk to an attorney who is licensed in one or both of those states to help you determine, number 1, which options might be available to you by statute and which one is going to make the most sense for you. If you are in Colorado or moving your business from or to Colorado, check the description for my contact info if you want more help with that. And lastly, don't forget to check the description for links to additional information and resources. I've got some free downloadable guides and checklists and all kinds of fun stuff for you there. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Aiden Durham, and I'll see you next time.